Hi there, and welcome to my channel where I share some of my amateur projects. The paint dries fast, and once it's ready, I'll take a sponge sander and add some random scratches here and there. Today I found a few pieces of scrap wood lying around the edges of my workshop. So I thought, why not turn them into something nice? I am going to try making two unique picture frames that you can use to decorate your wall or place on a console. Let's get started. First, I carefully removed any nails or bits of metal from the wood. Then I started cutting. For that vintage vibe, I picked out old pieces with nicely worn edges. They already have a story to tell. If you are into simple DIY woodworking projects like this, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. I didn't use a measuring tape, just eyeballed the size for the frame. Then I used a staple gun and some fast drying glue to assemble the pieces. After finishing the frames, I'll be adding some black and white photos. I printed just some anonymous vintage style shots. But if you want, you can glue in a white background first, and then add your own pictures. It actually looks really nice that way. I am going to cut 4 thin strips from this piece of wood. I'll glue them around the edges of the frame as decorative trim. It's a simple touch, but it can really change the plain look of the frame and give it a nice little upgrade. With a wood rasp, I'm gently shaping the edges to make them a bit more rounded. So, the first frame is done. I'm just fixing up the edges a little and giving it a final sanding before I start painting. For paint, I decided to use blue acrylic from a tube. I'll apply it with a brush. It doesn't need to be fully opaque, because later I'm going to sand it down a bit to give it a worn, vintage look. The paint dries fast, and once it's ready, I'll take a sponge sander and add some random scratches here and there. That's how we'll get that nice worn out, vintage vibe. Alright, time for the second frame. I picked out 2 old pieces with naturally worn edges. I'll cut the ends at a 45-degree angle and put them together to start building the frame. Once I apply the glue, I also staple the corners with a staple gun just to make it more solid. This helps the frame stay nice and sturdy. Since the edges of the wood weren't perfectly even, the corners didn't line up quite right. So I'm using a wood rasp to even them out, and then I'll clean things up with some sanding. This time, I decided to go with a dark walnut wood stain for the color. I prepared these small wood strips to add along the edges of the frames. After painting them with black spray paint, I'll glue them in place. Then, using a sponge sander, I'll scuff up the edges and corners to give them a worn, vintage look. The frame is done. Finally, I'll finish it off with a clear spray varnish. After that, I'll cut out and glue the black and white photo I printed, fitting it into the frame. And that's it, all done. And that's it. It only took me about 2 hours and 10 minutes to make these 2 frames. It's a great way to reuse wood you might otherwise throw away. I hope you enjoyed it.